The spark. Imagine a teenage boy. It's late at night, his parents are asleep, his room is dark except for the dim glow of a screen. His fingers fly across the keyboard of a machine most people have never even seen before. To him, this isn't a toy. It's not even a tool. It's a portal, a way into the future. That boy? William Henry Gates III, the kid who would grow into the man the world would call Bill Gates. But here's the twist. When Bill was born, no one could have guessed he'd one day be the richest man on earth. No one could have predicted that his ideas would place a computer in nearly every home, on nearly every desk, and eventually, in every pocket. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story about business. It's a story about obsession, about risk, about the fine line between vision and madness. And it's a story about how one boy's restless curiosity changed the destiny of humanity itself.
Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button right now, because you don't want to miss stories like this. And let me promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at your own computer, your own phone, or your own life in the same way again. Bill Gates was born on October 28, 1955, in Seattle, Washington. His family was comfortable, upper middle class. His father, Bill Gates Sr., was a tall, commanding attorney. His mother, Mary, was a strong-willed woman, deeply involved in community work. From the start, young Bill was different. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy. He was quiet, introspective, always thinking. He'd spend hours reading encyclopedias for fun. While other kids played baseball, Bill buried himself in books about science, history, and strategy. One surprising fact? Bill devoured the entire World Book Encyclopedia set by the time he was in middle school, page by page, every volume. Who does that? And there was another thing. Bill had a competitive streak, a sharp one. He loved winning. Whether it was games, debates, or challenges from his parents, Bill played to win. His mother worried about how intense he was. His father admired it. But no one yet knew where this fire would take him. Mini-hook. Everything shifted when Bill met a machine that would change his life. In the late 1960s, the Lakeside School, an elite private school in Seattle, did something unheard of. They bought access to a computer terminal. Back then, computers were rare beasts, huge, expensive, locked away in labs or universities. But here was one, sitting in Bill's school.
The first time Bill touched that keyboard, something clicked. He was hooked. Hours melted away as he explored this new world of code. Soon, he wasn't just using programs, he was writing them. It wasn't just him. A group of curious kids gathered around that machine. Among them was Paul Allen, quiet, brilliant, a couple years older than Bill. Together, they started tinkering, hacking, experimenting, and sometimes bending the rules. One night, Bill and Paul discovered a flaw in the computer's operating system. They realized they could get unlimited access to machine time without paying. They snuck in, they pushed the system, and they got caught. The punishment? They were banned from the computer. But here's the twist. Instead of throwing them out forever, the company that owned the computer actually hired Bill and Paul to help find more bugs. Think about that. Teenagers being hired to hack a system in the 1970s. That was the beginning. Bill's skills grew sharper by the day. Soon, he was writing software to schedule classes at his school. Rumor has it, he tweaked the code to place himself in classes full of girls. Smart, mischievous, and already thinking like a strategist. By the time Bill was 17, he and Paul Allen formed their first company. They called it trafo data. The idea? To analyze traffic data using small computers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clever, and it gave them a taste of entrepreneurship. Here's a hidden gem. Trafo data wasn't a massive success. In fact, it flopped. But that failure laid the groundwork for everything that came next. Bill graduated from Lakeside and headed to Harvard in 1973. He was supposed to study law, follow in his father's footsteps, become the respectable professional his family expected. But Harvard had something else in store. Bill didn't care much for lectures. He skipped classes. He spent his nights in the computer lab, living off pizza and soda, immersed in lines of code. Professors noticed his brilliance, but also his distraction. Bill wasn't there for grades. He was there for the machine. And while at Harvard, fate struck. One day, Paul Allen walked into Bill's dorm with the latest issue of Popular Electronics. On the cover was the Altair 8800, a new personal computer. Cheap, accessible, revolutionary. For Bill and Paul, it was like a lightning bolt. They saw the future. They realized that this wasn't just a gadget, it was the spark of a new industry. Bill turned to Paul and said, "This is happening. We need to be part of it." That moment was the crossroads. Bill could have stayed in Harvard, finished law school, lived a comfortable life. Or he could leap into the unknown, risk everything, bet on a future no one else could see. And Bill Gates, he jumped. He dropped out of Harvard, packed his things, and, with Paul Allen at his side, set out to build the software that would define an era. But here's the cliffhanger. At that point, Bill had no product, no company, no safety net, just a dream. And dreams, as you'll see, can be dangerous. The rise of Microsoft. Picture this. It's 1975. Two young men, barely out of their teens, sitting in a cramped room in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Papers scattered, coffee cups piled high, a phone on the desk that won't stop ringing. On the other end, the makers of the Altair 8800 computer. They'd just heard that Bill Gates and Paul Allen had written software for their machine. But there was one problem. At that moment, Bill and Paul... It was a bluff, a gamble. But Bill was calm. He told the company, "Yes, we have software. Yes, it works." Then he hung up, turned to Paul, and said, "We'd better get started." For the next 8 weeks, they barely slept. They coded nonstop, and when they finally delivered the software, a version of basic programming language for the Altair, it worked. It wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. The Altair team was stunned. Suddenly, tiny computers had power. They could be programmed, they could be useful. And the software? Written by two kids who had no business calling themselves professionals. That moment birthed a company, a small name on a piece of paper, Microsoft. Mini-hook. But success didn't come without betrayal. Here's what happened. As soon as their basic software hit the market, something strange occurred. Copies started spreading everywhere. People shared it freely. At first, Bill was confused, then furious. He sat down and wrote an open letter to computer hobbyists. In it, he accused them of stealing, of robbing him and Paul of the ability to keep building. The letter was bold, harsh, and it made him enemies in the growing world of computer enthusiasts. But it also revealed something crucial about Bill Gates. He wasn't just a dreamer. He was ruthless, focused. He believed software had value, that it wasn't just lines of code, it was the future, and he was going to protect it. Microsoft slowly grew. Bill recruited more programmers. Paul handled the technical vision.
But Bill was the strategist, the negotiator, the one who could see 10 steps ahead.
In 1980, IBM, the giant of the computer world, was looking for software to power its first personal computer. They approached Microsoft. Bill Gates was 24 years old. Think about that. The most powerful company in computing was sitting across the table from a skinny college dropout who hadn't even been in business for a decade. IBM asked if Microsoft could deliver an operating system. Bill said yes. Just one problem. They didn't have one. Another gamble. Bill found a tiny company that had built a simple operating system called QDOS. He bought the rights for $50,000, rebranded it as MS-DOS, and handed it to IBM. Here's the twist. Bill didn't sell it outright. He licensed it. That meant IBM could use it, but Microsoft kept ownership, a decision that would be worth billions. Hidden gem fact? At the time, IBM's executives thought the money was in the hardware, not the software. They shrugged at Microsoft's licensing deal. They had no idea they'd just handed Bill Gates the keys to the kingdom. MS-DOS became the standard. Every IBM PC ran it, and soon every IBM clone ran it too. Microsoft's software spread like wildfire, and with each copy, Bill's empire grew.
But Gates wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted computers not just to run, but to feel alive. So he set his sights on something new. Windows. Imagine a world where every computer screen was just black text on a green background, no icons, no mouse, just lines of code. That was computing in the early 1980s. But Microsoft's vision, a screen with windows you could move, menus you could click, graphics that felt almost friendly. When Windows launched in 1985, critics mocked it. They called it clunky, slow, a joke compared to Apple's sleek Macintosh. But Bill didn't care. He saw what others didn't. That once people tasted this new interface, they'd never go back. And he was right. By the 1990s, Windows was everywhere. Offices, homes, schools. The world was running on Microsoft. Mini-hook. But power has a price, and with dominance comes enemies. As Microsoft grew, so did the whispers. Competitors claimed Gates crushed them. Partners complained he stole ideas. The U.S. government accused Microsoft of being a monopoly. In public, Bill played it cool. Soft voice, nervous laugh, geeky glasses. But behind closed doors, he was relentless. Colleagues said working with Bill was like stepping into a storm. He grilled programmers with tough questions, pushed projects to the edge, demanded perfection.
And yet, people followed him because they knew he was building something no one else could see. Hidden gem fact: Bill Gates still memorized license plate numbers of employees to know who stayed late at the office. That's how obsessive he was. By the mid-1990s, Bill Gates wasn't just successful, he was untouchable. For several years in a row, he was the richest man in the world. His fortune soared past $50 billion. His software powered 90% of the world's computers. And the world began to ask, how did a quiet boy from Seattle end up controlling the digital universe? But here's where the story takes a turn. Because just when Gates seemed unstoppable, the world of technology was about to shift under his feet. A new frontier was rising, one that Microsoft didn't fully see coming: the Internet. And the question was, could Bill Gates adapt, or would the empire he built start to crumble? The Internet storm and reinvention. The mid-1990s, A new sound began echoing through the world. The screech of a dial-up modem, the hum of a connection being made. The internet was arriving, and for the first time in decades, Bill Gates was behind. You see, in the early days of the internet, Microsoft didn't take it seriously. Gates once said the internet was just a passing fad, a toy for hobbyists. Meanwhile, tiny startups like Netscape were racing ahead, building web browsers that opened a door to a new digital world. For the first time, Microsoft looked vulnerable. And Gates? He hated vulnerability. So he made a move. In 1995, Bill wrote a now legendary memo called the Internet Tidal Wave. In it, he admitted what no one expected. Microsoft had underestimated the Internet. But from that day forward, everything would change. He threw Microsoft into the online war. Engineers were reassigned, projects scrapped. The mission was clear: dominate the Internet. And soon came Internet Explorer, a browser bundled with Windows, free, easy, impossible to ignore. Many hook. But this victory came at a cost.
Competitors screamed foul. They said Microsoft was using its power to crush anyone in its path. Netscape, once a rising star, collapsed under the weight of Microsoft's aggression. And soon, the U.S. government stepped in. In 1998, the Department of Justice filed one of the biggest antitrust cases in history. They accused Microsoft of being a monopoly, of strangling competition, of using its dominance not to innovate, but to destroy. The trial was explosive. For the first time, the world saw a different Bill Gates. In the courtroom, he was combative, defensive. The quiet nerd now looked like a cornered titan. Videos of his testimony went viral. He dodged questions, argued semantics, seemed frustrated and cold. The public image of the friendly genius cracked. And in 2000, the verdict came down. Microsoft was guilty of antitrust violations. The company faced the possibility of being split apart. Bill's empire, the one he'd built from a bluff in Albuquerque, was suddenly at risk of collapsing. Hidden gem fact. During the trial, Microsoft actually prepared for the company to be broken into two. One for Windows, one for everything else. That's how close it came to disaster. But Gates wasn't just a fighter in business. He was a master of reinvention. He stepped down as Microsoft's CEO in 2000, handing the reins to his longtime friend, Steve Ballmer. Bill's role shifted. He became chief software architect, focused more on ideas than lawsuits. And quietly, something else was happening inside him.
For decades, Bill Gates had been the ruthless capitalist, the monopolist, the man who worked employees to exhaustion and crushed competitors without blinking. But now, with billions in the bank and a storm around him, he started asking a new question. What good is all this power if it doesn't make the world better? The seeds had been planted earlier. In 1994, Bill had married Melinda French, a smart, compassionate manager at Microsoft. Together, they started talking about giving back. Not just charity, but impact. How could they use their fortune to save lives? By the late 1990s, they had quietly created the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. At first, it was small. But as Microsoft's battles raged on, the foundation grew. And soon, Bill's attention shifted from software to global health. He read reports about diseases most Americans never thought about: malaria, polio, tuberculosis, illnesses killing millions of children every year in Africa and Asia. And Bill was stunned. He had spent his life obsessed with microchips and code, but here was a problem no one was solving. He realized something powerful. A mosquito could kill more people than any piece of software ever could. That realization changed his destiny. By 2006, Bill announced he would step back from day-to-day work at Microsoft. The man who built the world's largest software company was walking away to fight disease and poverty. The world was shocked. Critics said he was running from the heat of Microsoft's antitrust wounds. Others whispered it was Melinda's influence. But Bill insisted this was his next great project.
And he threw himself into it with the same obsession he once brought to Windows. He studied vaccines, met with scientists, visited remote villages, asked endless questions. People who worked with him said Gates was relentless. He wanted data, proof, results. If a program didn't work, he cut it. If it did, he scaled it worldwide. And slowly, the foundation began achieving the impossible. Millions of children were vaccinated. Polio cases plummeted. Entire countries began eradicating diseases that had plagued them for centuries. Hidden gem fact: Bill Gates once personally funded mosquito nets for villages after visiting Africa and realizing that something so simple could save thousands of children from malaria. Yet, even as he shifted into philanthropy, Gates couldn't fully escape controversy. Some accused him of trying to play world health czar. Others questioned whether one billionaire should wield so much influence over global policy. But whether loved or hated, one thing was clear: Bill Gates was no longer just a businessman. He was something larger, a symbol of how wealth could be weaponized, not for luxury, but for change. And this transformation set the stage for the final act of his story. Because while he built an empire of software, he was now trying to build an empire of hope. But could a man once seen as ruthless truly become the world's great humanitarian? Or would his past forever haunt his future? Legacy, controversy, and the future. By the late 2000s, Bill Gates was no longer the cutthroat CEO everyone feared. He was becoming something else: the world's richest philanthropist. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grew into the largest private foundation in the world. Its mission was staggering: to fight global poverty, improve education, and eradicate diseases that had haunted humanity for centuries.
Bill poured billions into vaccines. He backed new schools. He funded clean water systems. His focus was sharp. Children should not die of diseases we already know how to prevent. And the numbers were astounding. Since its creation, the foundation has spent over $50 billion. And a hidden gem fact: experts estimate their work has saved more than 100 million lives. Think about that. One man's wealth redirected, changing the course of entire nations. But just as Bill's image began to glow, the world around him shifted again. Mini-hook. Because when you stand this tall, shadows always find you. The 2010s brought critics. Some said the foundation was too powerful, shaping global health policy with little oversight. Others claimed Gates was meddling in education systems he didn't fully understand. And then came 2020. The world was struck by a pandemic, COVID-19, a virus that shut down borders, emptied streets, and forced billions into isolation. And suddenly Bill Gates, who had stepped away from Microsoft years earlier, was back in the headlines, not for software, but for his eerie predictions. Back in 2015, he had stood on a TED stage and warned, "The world is not ready for the next epidemic." He even used the image of a virus spreading through the globe. Most ignored him at the time, but when COVID hit, that talk went viral. Some hailed him as a prophet, a man who saw what others couldn't. But others turned on him. Conspiracy theories exploded. Claims that Gates had engineered the virus, that he wanted to track people with microchips in vaccines. Overnight, the man who had once been admired for saving lives was accused of plotting to control them.
It was absurd, but it revealed something deeper. Bill Gates had become more than a person. He was a symbol, a lightning rod for the world's fears and hopes about science, technology, and power. Hidden gem fact: during the pandemic, Gates quietly funded research for 7 different vaccine candidates at once, knowing most would fail, but betting that at least one would save the world time. And while the public argued, Bill kept working. He focused on vaccine distribution. He urged rich countries not to hoard doses. He pushed for global access, especially in poorer nations. But as the decade went on, another storm hit his personal life. In 2021, after 27 years of marriage, Bill and Melinda Gates announced their divorce. The news stunned the world. The couple who had built a global foundation together was splitting apart. Rumors swirled. Stories emerged about Bill's past, his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, his intense work habits, his awkward, sometimes cold personality. For a man who had spent years reinventing himself as a humanitarian, the headlines were brutal. Yet through it all, Bill did what he always had. He kept moving forward. Because here's the truth: Bill Gates is not simple. He is not a saint. He is not a villain. He is a human being. Brilliant, flawed, driven, restless. A boy who once read encyclopedias for fun grew into a man who rewired the world. A college dropout built a company that defined an era. A ruthless competitor transformed into a global philanthropist. And even now, in his late 60s, Bill Gates isn't done. He talks about climate change as the next great crisis. He invests in clean energy, nuclear fusion, sustainable farming. He warns that the clock is ticking, that humanity must act fast. Once, his goal was to put a computer in every home. Now, his goal is to give the planet itself a future. Maybe that's the real story of Bill Gates. Not Microsoft, not Windows, not even the billions given away, but the evolution. The idea that people can change. That a man once feared as a monopolist can become a champion of the poor. That brilliance can be used not just for profit, but for survival. It doesn't mean he's perfect. It doesn't mean he's beyond criticism. But it does mean one thing: he's impossible to ignore. So, tonight, as you think about the story of Bill Gates, ask yourself, what will people say about your story? Will they say you played it safe? Or will they say you took your gifts, whatever they are, and tried to change the world? Bill's life reminds us that success is not the end of the journey. It's just the beginning of the next question. What will you do with it? And maybe that's why, love him or hate him, Bill Gates will be remembered, not as a man who had everything, but as a man who tried to give it away.
So if this story inspired you, if it made you think, smile, or even gasp, make sure you subscribe right now. Because more incredible journeys are waiting. Stories of humans who dared to change the world. And who knows, the next story might just be yours.